From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. A survey by international consulting services shows that Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro is leading in the polls with 55.9% of support for the upcoming election. The poll conducted between April 20 and May 4th puts Henry Falcón of the Progressive Advance Party in second place with 25.4% of support from likely voters. Javier Bertucci, Hope for Change candidate, is in third with 16.2%. President Maduro has been campaigning in the state of Portuguesa. Speaking earlier at a rally in Trujillo, President Maduro said the government has brought 42,000 young people into education and work through the Chamba Juvenil plan. He said he's also approving funds for Trujillo to acquire new vehicles for all public transport, along with more resources to increase meat production in the region. He asked supporters to make sure they go out and vote on election day.
If on Sunday, May 20, it starts raining that afternoon, that's not an excuse not to vote. We have to go out and vote, with rain, however we can, because it's the fate of Venezuela, of our homeland. On May 20, we will decide the next years of what will happen in this country.
Meanwhile, opposition candidate Henry Falcón says his first act as president, if he wins, will be to release all political prisoners. Falcón was speaking in Carabobo, where he said he wants to open ports, airports, and borders to humanitarian aid. He said the international community should get ready to send ships so that people of Venezuela can receive medicine without problems.
No hay descanso.
The political conditions give us an extraordinary opportunity to change this country. Our first decree will be an efficient cabinet for the country that attends to the critical economic and social situation, but also to re-establish international relations. And the second decree will be the liberation of all political prisoners, freedom for all political prisoners.
A delegation of the Venezuelan indigenous Pemon people is in Germany to bring back a sacred stone that was stolen 20 years ago. Our correspondent Ibai Arvide brings us the story.
Finally, the day has arrived for the Venezuelan Pemon people to perform a healing ritual before the Cueca stone, placed in Berlin. The stone was stolen 20 years ago and brought both the Pemon people and the Venezuelan government to fight for all these years to bring it back to its origin. Today, a delegation formed by 10 shamans, 5 men and 5 women, has arrived here to start the return process for the Cueca stone to Venezuela.
I'm here with my children, with my grandchildren, with the delegation. We don't really know how we arrived here, but we do know that we come from far away and that we are happy to meet this stone, which is our grandmother. We are happy to be with our grandmother, Cueca, and that she's going to come back with us.
We will see how long it will take for the stone to return. The Venezuelan people, and especially the Pemon community, are waiting for her.
Ibai Arvide from Berlin. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza participated in the final session of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, or ECLAC, in Havana, Cuba. Arreaza made a call for unity as the only way to achieve peace and prosperity. He spoke about the way colonialism is still affecting many societies.
Today, as never before, we need to defend multilateralism and the rule of international law, to open a world of peace and prosperity and knowledge. But on the contrary, the disregard of multilateralism and the avoidance of international law is getting more and more common. This puts peace, prosperity, human development, and even life itself at risk. Inequality is not natural. It is a consequence of colonialism and neocolonialism. Yesterday, we convened a meeting in Caracas with African and Caribbean countries to seek reparations for the Afro-descendant people, and we can show how slavery still has effects in our society and in our structures.
Let's go to our correspondent Laura Prada from Havana with more on what happened on that last day of this meeting.
Hello, yes, nice to greet you from Havana. Indeed, today is being held the last day of sessions of the 37th session of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, here in Havana. Today is being held a panel about multilateralism with foreign ministers from Latin America and the Caribbean. In this panel is being discussed not only multilateralism but also the Agenda 2030, about which Amina Mohammed, Vice General Secretary of United Nations, was saying, qualified this agenda as a paradigm that includes change and development nationally and multilaterally. And on his intervention, the Venezuelan Chancellor Jorge Arreaza, he was saying that if this agenda was accomplished by all countries in the close future, it will be a real revolution, a true revolution, economically and socially. This is what's been taking place here in Havana. Now this panel continues, and in the afternoon will be the closing session of this 37 meeting of ECLAC here in Havana. We have shared with you what have been going on here.
That was Laura Prada from Cuba. In Barbados, the opposition Barbados Labour Party has launched their manifesto, laying out plans for the country if they win the election. The Mia Mottley-led DLP is promising free education for Barbadian students at the University of the West Indies, a major tax reform to go along with wage increases for public servants and the restructuring of Barbados' foreign debt.
All tonight, but I will address a few for you. Because the first thing we have to do within the first 4 weeks of office is to deal with the fact that our foreign reserves are falling and that we have a foreign debt payment of $120 million to pay in June. That is why I shall forever hold Frondel Stewart responsible for carrying us to the edge in calling this election. It is wickedness on stilts.
The ruling Democratic Labour Party in Barbados continues to remind citizens of its progress during its term. At a rally on Thursday, candidates reminded the citizens there they created the first ever youth policy and implemented the Cultural Industries Act, which was created for entertainers and artists to make money. The DLP says they have been able to do a number of things with scarce resources. We'll take a short break now, but join us after this video from our multimedia team.
Determine who's allowed to be here and who's not allowed to be here, regardless of whether you feel that you're allowed to be here or not, okay?
Continue. Right, to document. I'm not taking your picture. This is Facebook Live. Here's what we're gonna do. That's fine. I need to go back to... I have every right to call the police and not... Continue. Get my good side. I need to go back to the 12th floor to finish writing my paper.
What's, you got your ID on you?
Yeah, I do.
All right, can we see that?
Why?
We got a police call for you.
Okay, I just opened the door to my apartment.
That's fine. I can see that.
Okay. I think when someone I deserve to be here. I pay tuition like everybody else. I I'm not going to justify my existence here.
Welcome back. Colombian local media has reported FARC party leader Jesus Santrich has ended his hunger strike after 32 days. Santrich went on strike after he was arrested at the request of the United States on alleged drug trafficking charges. Human rights activists and politicians ask him to go off the hunger strike so that he can live to create peace. For more on the status of this case, let's go to our reporter José Manuel Jiménez.
On Thursday night, the political leader of former guerrilla FARC, Jesus Santrich, was taken from El Tunal Hospital in the south of Bogota to the Foundation Caminos de Libertad, in the center of the city, which is part of the Colombian Church. This happened for humanitarian reasons to keep Santrich comfortable after his decision of starting a hunger strike, which has lasted 33 days until now. Santrich is expected to reconsider his decision and end his strike.
In Colombia, the UN Council in Geneva has made 200 recommendations to improve the country's human rights record. The recommendations include actions on the systematic murder of social leaders, the link of victims to justice and peace groups, and the protection of child soldiers. On May 15, Colombian state must decide if it would listen to these recommendations.
These are serious recommendations about the increase in homicides against leaders and human rights activists. There were also recommendations about the impunity issue, which we think is very important. Because we must find those responsible for homicides against the vulnerable people, also recommendations about the implementation of the peace agreement that must be respected.
The countries involved in this discussion about Colombia talk about the recruitment and the risks of these territories. The Colombian state needs to strengthen its prevention capacity and to work on preventing children joining armed groups.
Still in Colombia, Héctor Beltrán, who died this past week, spent 30 years trying to find out what happened to his son and others who disappeared in Colombia in 1985.
She is Clara Beltrán, daughter of Héctor Beltrán. He, along with other families, campaigned to find out what happened to his son and others who disappeared during the capture and recovery of the Palace of Justice in 1985. Today, Clara remembers his fight.
I was very little, so most of my memories of my brother came from my parents and other siblings. Those memories are in this book. Everything that he believed in, everything he wanted to accomplish but never could because they didn't let him. This book is a summary of his struggle.
Other desperate parents joined the fight. They denounce a crime that was never acknowledged in Colombia.
It's a long road, with fights in courts and demonstrations for justice for more than 60,000 people who disappeared in this country.
The Beltrán family recovered the remains of his son. 30 years later, other families haven't had this luck.
The remains of people who were handed over to their families still count as disappeared because we don't know what happened to them. So this is very tragic because the families that have been fighting for 32 years can't close the chapter, and their wounds are continuously reopened because they have not been told the truth.
For the families of the disappeared, the military will not give in and will continue to hide the truth about what happened in the taking of the Palace of Justice.
I really doubt that the people who know what happened in the Palace of Justice, who are now in the high military command, will tell the truth. I think it's in the hands of the law and whatever forensic medicine can do with the remains.
Many of the parents who started the struggle for truth have already died without ever finding out what happened to their loved ones in 1985.
Mexico celebrated Mother's Day on Thursday, but while some celebrated, hundreds took to the streets in honor of their loved ones who have been killed or disappeared.
For the 7th year in a row, mothers of the disappearing Mexico took the streets to demand truth and justice from the government for the thousands of cases that are yet to be cleared in the general and state prosecutors' offices.
¿Dónde están? ¿Dónde están? Nuestros hijos, ¿dónde están?
Here in the state of Nuevo León, just like in other states, they don't take us seriously. They think we are crazy, and there aren't any real investigations.
The pain of losing their sons and daughters has united them, but it has also given them strength to fight against the government's indolence. The mothers and the families, along with civil organizations, are looking for them, even in hidden graves.
It can happen to anyone. Normally people say that if it happened to you, it's because you were up to something. But it's not like that. You just had to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
4 disappearances are growing in this country. The most notable case is what happened with 43 students from the Ayotzinapa Rural School. Their mothers have taken the case to international courts because Mexican authorities have ignored them for more than 43 months.
We have to demand justice for all these atrocities the government did with our loved ones. And we, as mothers, can't stay at home crying. We have to go out and demonstrate.
Their testimonies make it clear that violence is felt all throughout the country. In Tamaulipas, there are approximately 10,000 disappeared, and in Veracruz, the last known case involves 6 young people from Tlaxcala.
On December 2012, Enrique Peña Nieto promised to improve security, but also said there were no modifications to the security strategy, and that lack of security has reigned in this country for many years.
According to the official numbers, there are almost 35,000 disappeared in Mexico, with 29,000 murdered in 2017. It was the most violent year in the last 20 years. The victims' families demand the implementation of a law promoted by President Enrique Peña Nieto on November 16 of last year. It contemplates the creation of a national search commission and a DNA bank that allows the necessary investigations on the field.
The United Nations has asked Guatemala to end discrimination and racial segregation of indigenous people in the country. The UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Victoria Tauli Corpus, has visited the country and made a preliminary report on persistent discrimination. Tauli Corpus said also that she's worried about the killing of 2 campesino leaders during the last 24 hours. The murders took place in areas where transnational projects are planned.
Following these murders, we need more action to be taken. We must ask the government of Guatemala to investigate these murders and bring these criminals to justice. Most of the prisoners I've talked to told me that the authorities have no evidence against them, despite the fact that they are criminalized and were charged with being vagabonds.
In Chile, the Mapuche Religious Authority has condemned the government's bias against their leader, Celestino Córdoba, after he was denied permission to leave prison for 48 hours to renew his spiritual vows. The Machi called for massive demonstrations in the Araucanía region.
There has not been any concrete action by the government to fulfill its promise. They have used their media outlets to accuse me of being a murderer, to lie about my health, contradicting medical reports. They have told me 4 times that security forces will come to give me an answer, but they have canceled our meetings without any kind of explanation. I have welcomed dialogue with the government, but after all these lies, we have had enough.
A health epidemic is affecting a number of regions in Peru. The disease mainly affects the motion and strength of the arms and legs. Jaime Herrera brings us more details from Lima.
In the last 2 weeks, the health system of the La Libertad region in Peru has registered more than 15 cases of the Guillain-Barré syndrome. More than 10 other cases were registered in Lima as well, among people from various regions of the country. This has forced the health ministry to declare a health alert in both regions. There's never been a case like this before in the country, so it's deeply concerning because it's a very serious disease that affects the motion of arms and legs. The health ministry still doesn't know how people contract the illness. Since the alert was declared, the ministry has been asking people to take care of their respiratory and intestinal systems and to prevent being bitten by mosquitoes that may transfer Zika. It's also possible that patients with Guillain-Barré might have had Zika before. The symptoms presented by people with this disease are weakness and cramps in the lower extremities. The Ministry of Health also said that they are taking care of ill people in the previously mentioned regions and are also ready to act around the country. But this alert revealed the real situation of the health system in Peru. Many have said that they were not attended to before, in different health centers, when they started feeling the symptoms, especially in Trujillo. People also said that the lack of a health insurance, private or public, forced them to buy medicine at high prices in private pharmacies, and that many of these people are poor. Experts state that the national health system showed the little concern it has for the most vulnerable sectors and how unprepared it is to respond to outbreaks.
That was Jaime Herrera from Lima. Opposition leader and former president of Guyana, Barat Jagdeo, plans to raise a motion in parliament over the fishermen who were murdered by pirates in Suriname's waters in late April. Jagdeo criticized the government for not doing more to ensure the safety of fishermen and said the government acted like it was business as usual after the incident. He wants the government to work closer with their Suriname counterparts, saying police often disregard reports of piracy because the victims are Guyanese.
So we want to know what is being done on both sides, the measure of collaboration between Suriname and Guyana on this issue. Not just to the backslapping or coming to say we cooperating fully. We want to be assured that the security forces of the two countries are collaborating at the highest levels to ensure that we catch these perpetrators. We want assurance.
In Bolivia, the most extensive cable car system in the world is celebrating its 4th anniversary. Bolivia's government decided to use cable cars because the topography made it impossible to build a subway. In 4 years, the first 6 lines have transported 125 million passengers. President Evo Morales said the company, which runs the cable cars, though a state company, it is completely self-sufficient and is looking to expand.
And now our cable car company is being invited to provide services in other parts of South America. Imagine our company that provides services, managing cable cars in other countries. We've never had that before.
Let's go to this last short break, but you can join us again after a look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
Israeli forces have killed a Palestinian man and thousands are continuing protesting at the border before the U.S. Embassy moves to Jerusalem. Jabir Abu Mustafa was shot by Israeli forces while protesting east of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza At least 48 people have been injured, including 2 journalists. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, over the past 6 weeks, about 6,800 Palestinians have been wounded during the demonstrations, and at least 49 people have been killed by Israeli forces. Now let's have a look at some other stories that are making headlines around the world.
Preparations are underway at polling stations in Mosul, as Iraq's second city and former Islamic State bastion gets ready for a nationwide vote on May 12th, mere months after being rid of jihadist rule. Overall, 24.5 million voters are registered for the elections, with some of the roughly 1 million Iraqi voters living abroad also set to cast ballots. Thousands of people have marched in Suamed, Jordan, to support Palestinians and condemn U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel by moving their embassy to the city.
The Palestinian cause is passing through its most critical phase, where attempts are being made to end this cause and to jeopardize the Arab and Muslim nature of Jerusalem.
France clashes erupted between students on strike from Nanterre University and the police. Some police officers sprayed pepper spray directly at students' faces and used force to remove them from the premises. The students have closed down the university in protest against tighter university admission rules introduced with a new bill voted in by Emmanuel Macron's administration.
Following the announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump of a date for his historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, officials from both sides have been instructed to prepare the venue. On Thursday, Trump announced the meeting will take place in Singapore on June 12th. It will be the first ever face-to-face meeting between a sitting U.S. president and a North Korean leader. The Southeast Asian city-state was chosen because of its neutrality and proximity to Pyongyang. And a cafe in the South Korean city of Yeongju has created a special coffee for peace to celebrate the historic summit between North and South Korea. At the In-N-Out Cafe, customers can have a taste of peace with a special latte with the 2 leaders depicted together on the coffee foam. The bar started making this coffee since the historic meeting last month. Thanks to a special latte art printer, the bartender can spray the coffee powder like ink on the milk foam, and it takes less than 10 seconds for the selected image to appear on the latte. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But as you know, these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to follow us also on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
The evidence is well organized. It reveals the stratagems that the power uses to control the system. Both resistance and dissidents condemn the crimes committed to achieve some whims.